Degener is on the show. Maris, welcome to the show.
I'm really glad to bring Maris Degener on the show today.
Wellness Force Radio, episode 94, with women's empowerment and inspirational figure in mental health awareness,
Our class speaker for the class of 2016, Maris Degener.
Forgiveness is a gift. It's not something that comes to us naturally. It's something we must grace upon ourselves should we want to continue to grow. Forgiveness is a gift that I've withheld from myself for so long because I felt like I had committed sins I could never repent. And I know this is ridiculous because every day I preach that mental illness isn't something we can control, it's only something we can live through. Every day I strive to prove to the world that the things we're handed only serve to make us more compassionate, more understanding, more relatable. And yet, this guilt has hung on to my fibers in a way I just can't shake. I'm sorry that I was hospitalized the weekend of Mother's Day. The weekend we were supposed to go to a baseball game together and stay in a nice hotel and be a happy family for once. I'm sorry that my mother was sleeping on a hospital bed next to me for days without a shower or a warm meal. I'm sorry I hurt the body and spirit that I now so fiercely protect. I'm sorry for it all, and I still haven't forgiven myself. I have accepted who I am. I have accepted where I've come from. Now it's time to forgive. I think it really began when I was younger, and I was in elementary school, and I started dealing with anxiety, and specifically hypochondria. So I was preoccupied with this sense of something's always wrong with me, I have an illness, I'm going to die. And at first it was just kind of bothersome to my family, like, oh, she's just a worrywart, she's always worrying.
It was the worst when she would go to bed, because now looking back, she was afraid that she was going to die, right? But I didn't get that at all.
Then as I got older, it started kind of manifesting itself as panic attacks and not wanting to leave the house and really isolating myself. And over time, it just kind of got worse. It says, don't look like that. That's something my dad used to say.
He used to say, don't look like that.
Because I would make faces.
Well, I mean, Maris, in her early years, her stubbornness came to play pretty quickly. She just had that way about her. There's stubbornness in her. She obviously was a great kid. She did all the good things. She had good friends.
She did really well in school. She never really wanted to be out with friends a lot, and so that was her normal ever since she was little. So I didn't think that she was isolating herself. I thought that this is her comfort zone, right? She likes to read a lot. I thought she just had trouble sleeping.
I think there's some symbolism here with the two different faces and kind of something about two different images being presented about who I was at the time.
this is where you get caught up in living in the community that you live in. I think Clayton's a great community, but it's an environment where you're always constantly trying to one-up, and my kid is smart and talented and is athletic, and because everywhere that we went, one of the first questions that people would ask Maris is, what sports do you play? What sport are you in? I would be like, well, she writes, or she's really talented, artist, and they just kind of looked at you like, okay, that's not how we measure success in our kids. I made her take swimming. She didn't want to be on swim team. And she had an anxiety attack halfway down the pool. I can't imagine how humiliating that was for her because everyone's watching. And she was hyperventilating, crying hysterically. And I think that's when it really hit me that it was bigger than I thought. And so even at that moment, I didn't think it was something that she needed help with, right? I thought we'd just work through it.
My parents didn't understand what was going on, and they'd say I was being manipulative or I was just panicking for no reason, which is kind of the point.
Just park at Art's house and walk. I think Maris and I probably should have had some more counseling together to talk through the scenarios and what happened. She made a comment that I felt that she just wanted attention. And I'm like, no, not at all. I don't think that at all.
He kind of just ignored that everything was going on. Not in that he ignored me, but I think he tried to avoid the fact that there was a greater issue. And he went and bought a car and tried to just live a normal life while this was going on, because I think that was easiest for him. My dad probably kind of struggled with the fact that he couldn't just fix me and he didn't have a way to just fix everything.
We were never a good family when it came to sitting down and eating meals together, which is something that I really regret. We always did our own thing, but she would at least eat out with us, and then it changed. She ate her meals in her room. What does that say there?
Tie tightly. I have no idea what that means.
Is she crying?
Maybe.
If I look back now, looking at her eyes, the eyes are really telling. And, they lose their sparkle. About 2 weeks into her freshman year, I was picking her up. She got in the car, and it was really hot, and she was wearing long sleeves and pants, and I was like, it is so hot, and she pulled up her sleeves, and she had scratch marks again, but I realized that they were perfect cut, and so I looked at her, and I'm like, oh my God, are you cutting yourself? I started going through her room. I told myself I was cleaning her room, but that's not what I was doing. And I found Tupperware containers with vomit in them. Deep down, if I really am being honest with myself, I knew there was something wrong. But I think I was afraid of what it was, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I wish I could go back and change that, because maybe she wouldn't have suffered so much.
When we realized she had an eating disorder and she was purging, and then we found out she was cutting herself, we thought we could just get her into counseling and Hopefully that would take care of it. Of course, we all jumped on the internet trying to do all this research. What does this mean? What is the causes? How do we fix this? We were hoping that would be what would take care of it and get her back on track, but it wasn't.
My parents did a good job of finding someone who I think they knew I would feel comfortable opening up to, but I still never did. People still remember the time I was missing. One day I was there, the next I was gone. When I think about anorexia, I think about paper-light ballerinas on their toes. I think about girls on scales, and girls in mirrors, and girls with measuring tape, like seamstresses of their own bodies. I don't think of me. But the thing about mental illnesses is that they don't discriminate. They find your cracks, and they fill them in with cement, slowly hardening you until you can't recognize your own foundation. They make you cold and solid and simultaneously unbreakable and terrifyingly fragile.
She had this gray look about her. Her hair was falling out. She just had this rapid weight loss over about a week, 10 days. Obviously, something else needed to be done.
Maris and I had an 11 o'clock appointment, and they, took her vitals to everything, and the doctor and I looked, and she said, okay, so I'm going to get her a bed at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital. You need to check her in within 2 hours. And that's not at all what I thought that she was going to say. Her heart rate was so low that they said, she could have had a heart attack in her sleep and died. And I was still in denial because I looked at her and I said, we're going to this Little League game on on Sunday. Can she check into the hospital on Monday? And she kind of looked at me like I was crazy, right? And she's like, no, she could die, so you need to get her to the hospital today.
I didn't want to go. On the way home, I tried to open the car door and fling myself out just so I could get away. I threatened to run into the hills by my house. Begged my parents, just said I would do anything if they didn't make me go.
She was sitting on the floor, and she said, I'm not going. And I said, no, you're going. It's either one way or two ways, because you're going.
And finally my dad just picked me up and threw me in the car, and we were on our way to Palo Alto.
The hospital was probably the hardest part. 10 days straight, 2 weeks straight. I didn't leave the hospital at all.
I stayed pretty strong, where Sharon, I think, she kind of goes to this is the worst that's going to happen. And, she could die, she's going to have a heart attack. And I'm like, we're going to be fine.
There were a handful of times where one parent came and stayed a night, but I was the only one that stayed the whole time. For me, I had to be there. There was no other choice. Especially that first night, I kept thinking back to when she was first born, and you have this beautiful little healthy baby. And I kept thinking, how did I let this happen to her? Because my only job was to make sure that she was going to be healthy. And I failed her. And so I had so much guilt, laying there holding her like that and having her crying and begging me to take her home, telling me that if I loved her, I would just take her home. And I just kept telling her, it's because I love you that you're going to be here. And it would have been so much easier for me to just take her home. Because she's a great kid, but in the depth of her illness, she could be so mean. and would say just some awful things to me. And the doctors kept telling me, just know that that's not her, that's the illness talking. They kept saying she might be able to go home tomorrow. And they said that after the second day, and then the third day, and it kept on. And then she started calling us liars and would, yell, "You guys are lying to me. I want to go home." And young girls would come in after her and leave before her, and it threw her into this. She literally was two people.
They don't tell you a whole lot about the process of being in that hospital, because there's this whole different world in there, because everybody has these different disordered tics, and it's almost like everybody's competing to be the most disordered person, because you're in this hospital where they're trying to take away the one thing that gives you a sense of control, and you almost want to prove that they're not doing it. Or I think what we're exposed to a lot is the media gives women a false sense of what they should look like, so that can lead to them thinking, oh, well, I can use my food to get there. For me, it was just well, food's something I can control, and I feel out of control in my life. And so if I can control my food, then maybe I'll be in control of everything.
The difficulty with eating disorders is that they are not a logical disorder. Individuals use food, lack of food, purging, compensatory behaviors as a way to numb their feelings, as a way to escape their feelings, as a way to maintain control in their environment. From when Maris walked into my office, it was clear, for the first time, it was clear to me that Maris was beyond her years. She has seemed to relate with adults. She seemed to just not relate to her peer group. And that was pretty consistent throughout the course of her life. And I think as development begins in your preteens, that becomes such an important piece of life. And she didn't feel that. And she started to feel what's wrong with me? And she didn't really feel like she had a place where she belonged at school. And around this same time, there was a shift in the home where mom went back to work. Now, that happens in many homes. Many parents that have stayed home with their children will return to work when kids start to get older. Absolutely normal. So you put these things together where she's like, where am I? What am I? Where do I belong? What's my role? What am I supposed to do? And you couple that with her anxiety and her high drive for perfection. And, it's kind of this perfect storm for anorexia to culminate.
At the hospital, they make you sit to eat your meal, and you have to eat it within, I think it was 20 to 30 minutes. It was so much food, and I thought there's no way she's going to be able to eat that. And it was very methodical. She just sat there, and it was just like a means to an end. Right? She was just going to put this food in her body, and she ate everything on her plate. And I realized she's going to be that perfect patient because she wants to be perfect, and then she wants to get out.
The first time I felt a reprieve from my anxieties was actually at the peak of my eating disorder. I wasn't cured. It was just a result of the numbness many experience at the apex of their struggle. I was so malnourished, so depressed, so hopeless. I simply didn't have the capacity for fear. In fact, I was fearless. I felt nothing at all. Not hunger, not pain, not even exhaustion. I barely felt present in my own life. This is my sketchbook that I had from the time right before I went into the hospital, during the hospital, and then right after I got out of the hospital. She would come to therapy, and she was very consistent, but we weren't gaining momentum in the deeper work of recovery because it was so hard for her to be raw. I got home and I wanted to get better really fast so that people would ignore me again and I could do what I wanted.
When they allowed us to go home, the doctor was, she was very clear. She said, she asked me, she said, do you think it's going to be easy when you take her home? And I said, no, it's going to be really hard. And she said, it's going to be harder than you think.
Like over the next few weeks, it was just explosive fights about what I was eating. Explosive fights about what they would put on my plate, screaming, crying, throwing stuff.
Getting her home was like having a newborn again. You had to like feed her every 2 hours, watch her, couldn't leave her alone, which I'm sure was probably something Maris hated, right? We didn't trust her at all.
I think we're the classic family, like, we're not talking about this. This is family stuff. Nobody's gonna know about this.
When I first got out of the hospital, I was a freshman in high school. It was a small town. We didn't talk about mental illness in school or anything. And I was really afraid of being made fun of. I would just say like, oh, I had a heart problem, or, you know, oh, I had really low blood pressure, and tried to leave it at that. But it was obvious that something was going on. I looked different, I was acting different. My mom would call me to make sure I was eating my lunch at school. My mom wouldn't let me walk places. I remember this one kid in homeroom literally picking up his chair and moving across the room because he didn't want to be next to a sick person. It led to me not being totally honest about it for a long time. And so it was like this constant mental battle where it was like, on one hand, I want to go back to controlling everything I'm doing, and I want to feel that sense of control again. And on the other hand, it was like, but I am terrified of going back to that place. I remember at one point, like they started kind of leaving me alone. Like my vitals had been fine for a while. And I was alone. I was like, I'm gonna try to do a push-up. And I like couldn't. And I was like, well, I'll try to do like a push-up like on my knees. I couldn't. And like I just remember like at that moment realizing like, okay, I've really done something to my body. And that was a really sickening feeling. And so it was at that point that I really wanted to find what healthy meant to me and find a way where I could be in control in a different way and in a way that was conducive to well-being.
We asked about yoga, and the doctor was like, absolutely, yoga will be good for her because it's just stretching. I'm like, okay. I didn't know anything about yoga, so I was like, sure. And she had been at Lululemon, I think, and saw that there was a free Lululemon class at a new studio that was just opening up in Walnut Creek called Just Be.
The hospital kept me alive, I won't deny that, but only in my body. The panic attacks came back once I returned from the hospital. They were violent outbursts of screaming and crying, pulling at my hair and scratching at my skin. The sense of control my disorder had given me, however false, was now gone, and I felt like my body belonged to someone else. I felt feral, like my body was disconnected from my mind. And then I found Just Be.
in some way we're looking outside of ourselves for reassurance, for direction. There's criticism, there's judgment, there's this tape that's playing in our mind that like we're not enough, we're not good enough, we're not in control, or we're not, whatever it is that's showing up. When I'm caught up in what I think others want from me, how I can show up for them, if I'm in a place of fear or scarcity or worry, then the depression sets in, then the panic attacks set in. So yoga brings us back to our center. It keeps bringing us back over and over again. We show up on our mat, we do the work, we move through the practice. We create this meditation in motion, or we create challenge and postures to show us what we need to see. It's like a mirror. The mat, the practice is like a reflection of what we need to see. And then from there, the work really starts.
That's what originally got me to my mat, was going through all of this, not wanting to wake up in the morning, not feeling inspired, not feeling like I had anything to give or anything to share with anybody. And sorry. And that it just shifts everything when you start to move your body, you start to loosen up energy, and then you start to see that everything, somebody else sees you, your teacher sees you, and it matters that you're in class and that you're on your mat. And then when you turn around and you get to start to share that with other people, it's absolutely incredible.
Yoga lifts that veil and helps us see like, oh, this is the tape that's playing in my mind, and that's not me.
Maris has historically struggled with accessing emotions, allowing her emotions to be present. And from what she's told me and my understanding is that being on the mat really allowed her to finally feel the emotion.
Maris will tell you that she's clumsy and doesn't have any athletic ability, and she started to find this peace in her body and be able to move, and she started to gain strength, and but not just physical strength, like this emotional and mental strength that she was getting. Maris started to change.
I remember for the weeks before, up until like the day before, I was not sure if I was going to be able to do it. And I remember feeling kind of dark about it and kind of like nervous that I wasn't ready, and nervous that I was still kind of too sick to do something that seemed so like pure and good. I guess I worried that I was too hollow, and I wasn't ready to be filled back up again.
She wasn't sure if she wanted to do it, right? So I told her she should try, and her biggest reservation was that there was a retreat at the end where she would have to go away, and she's not comfortable leaving home. And I said, we'll just get to that. We'll figure that out when we get there.
I don't think any 15-year-old could do teacher training. Maris is this like old soul. She was ready.
The similarity that both brought us to our mat and both brought us into teacher training to be able to share it was a feeling of being broken. We felt broken. There was a piece of us that we didn't feel like deserved to be healthy and happy, so we destroyed that. Her through an eating disorder and me through drugs and alcohol.
We immediately began by just taking a class together, just practicing together. And I remember being in child's pose, crying to myself. And they said, this is the beginning of a journey for you.
The teacher training not only was teaching her how to teach yoga, but it was giving her a space to be open and authentic. They had a lot of self-awareness type of work that they were doing.
I pretty much cried through the first 3 weeks of teacher training. Just any moment I could, I was just crying because I was so scared and I was so tired.
And so she found these women, all of the instructors were women. I don't know all of their stories, but all strong women in their own right. And they just took her in, embraced her. Jenny and the teachers were kind enough to allow me to go on the retreat with them, even though it probably took away a little from everyone else's experience. They knew that Maris needed the comfort for me to be there.
And we finished the teacher training with a retreat in Santa Cruz, up in the mountains. And part of it was silent, and we couldn't talk. So there's a lot of reflection there, and just walking in the trees and walking in the mountains, and just for hours alone wandering and thinking. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Like, people were there and they were happy to be moving and happy to be feeling in their bodies. And the whole message of the class was about feeling more than being an observer, and feeling more than preoccupying on maybe what you looked like or what this meant or how good you were. And it was more of it was just celebration of sensation. And I slowly fell in love with my cells again. I fell in love with the way movement felt in my body, the contraction of musculature, the breath circulating through my veins. I suddenly wanted nothing more than to feel what feeling alive felt like, to see if I could find that person I thought had died inside of me long before I got to know her. I was 15, and I was born.
So yoga gave Maris a purpose. It was something that she was passionate about, that she was good at, if you can be good at yoga. But it helped her mentally. You know, it was a time where she could just be with herself and not worry about the outside world. And when I've gone to some of the classes, there's always a message. You know, when I've done yoga in a sports club, there's no message. You're just moving your body. And so Jenny has no idea how grateful I am, because I really think she saved Maris. She gave her something that the doctors couldn't give her, that I couldn't give her.
I love teaching. I love teaching anywhere, anyone. Is there anybody in here who's never taken my class before? Crescent moon shape with your body as you reach your top arm forward towards the windows. Big breath in. Big breath out. Roll over to the right side. Take a block. Let's see how slippery this gets. You can curl it in, extend it back, and then spin open into full plank. How's that sound? Breathe in, reach towards the windows. Breathe out, plant your hands, step it back, and lower slow. Reach up and then pull your palms together to your heart. Press them together first, find that intention, and then exhale, take a twist towards the door you came. Good. Life is just a series of that cycle. Over and over and over again, we're faced with weird, hard things. And then they become our new comfortable familiar. But that's what makes life interesting. The love, the light in me sees and adores the love and light in each one of you. Thank you for sharing this practice in all of its weirdness with me. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Namaste. That summer where I first started teaching, I realized I had a lot to say, and I kind of wanted to write it down somewhere. I was like, I'm going to make a blog. I'm just going to make a website and throw all my writing up on it. And so I made it, and I started putting up, little blurbs about what I had taught and lessons I had learned while I was teaching. Nobody really read it. It was like my mom, and she would share with some of her friends. And then one of my teachers who had done my teacher training, she stopped me and she was like, I've been reading what you've been writing, and it's good. I can tell it comes from your heart. But sometimes I feel like you're afraid to say what you're really thinking.
I said I'd been reading her blog and that I liked it, but it was just another perfect girl telling, showing this facade, this mask of perfection. And by that time, teacher training was over, and so I knew that there was so much more to Maris. I could identify with her. I had an eating disorder in college. My mom told me 8 million different ways, how beautiful and perfect I was the way that I was, and it still happened. It still happened. It was a way to control an uncontrollable situation. My mom had terminal cancer. If that was going to go down, everything else was going to be perfect, I was going to be perfect and not make any waves. Really, what connects us all is what our struggles are.
And she looked at me and she said, you have to talk about the shit you don't want to talk about. That's important. And it just hit me. I was like, yeah, I do.
We're only sick as the secrets that we keep.
And so I sat down at the computer at the studio and I just wrote everything down. And I titled it, Talk About the Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. When things are all going in the right direction for a while, you forget the things that have gone wrong. You forget that you're only the person you are at this very moment because of all the things that have tested you. I lived my life, from as long as I can remember through the majority of middle school, riddled with fear. And although it affected my entire way of life, it wasn't something anyone in my family, myself included, talked about. I was anorexic. I know I'm not alone. 1 in 200 American women suffer from anorexia at this very moment. But here's the shit you don't want to talk about. You won't want to get better, not for a long time. You'll think you'll want to get better, and then get scared and won't. You'll try again and again and again. You'll slip up, you'll relapse, you'll feel like a failure. But somewhere along the line, you'll find something, just one little thing, that makes getting back up again feel worth it.
I think Maris blogging and putting it out there, it keeps her accountable, right? Because she's put it out there that she's struggled with this in the past. And one of her most recent blog posts has been saying it's going to be a lifelong process. And I was so proud of her for that, because that's the truth. I mean, I went through it when I was 18 years old, and it's still a struggle every single day.
Didn't feel real until the day it was actually published, and I pulled up CNN and there was a picture of me, and it had a headline about anorexia and yoga, and I was like, oh, people are gonna read this, people are gonna know who I am. It was the first time for a lot of people knowing what I went through, and that was scary in a way, but it was also very empowering to not have to hide from anybody anymore. All of a sudden I got all these letters and messages and emails and from people who had read it and connected with it, and people who wanted to know more, and people who wanted to know more about who I was.
I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, and I reached out to Maris knowing her story, and she became my mentor, where she would FaceTime me every week and she would give me little homework assignments for self-love, and we still do that.
She was one of the only people I felt like
understood me when I talked to her from a depression and anxiety standpoint. Like, she had been there and she was there, and so she was like my number one supporter during that time when I didn't feel comfortable talking to anyone else.
I really think it was the publication of that article that just made me feel like I was worthy of being heard. And I really saw the power in talking about the things that you don't want to talk about, like the ugly stuff, like the gritty stuff, the stuff that makes you uncomfortable and the stuff that you're afraid will make people look at you differently. Like, that's the valuable stuff. That's the things that will make people listen. It just gave me a new sense of purpose, I think. And so from there, I spent the rest of my senior year just like feeling like I could do anything, like I could say yes. And instead of trying to be as small as possible, I feel like I was trying to be as big as possible, and it was just a complete shift in the way I was approaching life.
So we're making I am statements. They're declarations about who you are. So we've seen some today that are like, I am awesome, I am brave, I am beautiful. And so I'll give you a blank card. You start thinking about what you want to write. You write I am and something that's unique to you. And every time you'll read it, it'll be like a reminder to yourself of how awesome you are. I'm Maris. Nice to meet you guys.
When I found out that she was coming here, I was really excited actually because I do find her such an inspiration. So I was really excited that I'd actually get to meet her and just like say hi and introduce myself.
Start to imagine one dream you have for yourself. Maybe it's to be a soccer superstar. Maybe it's to be a doctor. Maybe it's just to be a kind and happy person.
You're going to look at your partner and you're going to say that fear as though you're saying it to them. So if my biggest fear is that I'm a failure, I'm going to look at my partner and say, you're a failure. Yeah.
Our class speaker for the class of 2016, Maris Degener.
At one time or another, we've all felt out of place. We've all felt lost, confused, and misdirected. We have all felt like we have nowhere to go. But today, we have seen that it is up to us to create that space where we belong. It is not something to be discovered, it is something to be created. Something we can only construct once we shed ourselves of the fear that there is no one and no place to accept us. As we get ready to go off into the world for the first time, we aren't doing it to find anything that isn't already inside of us. Like many other students, when I began to realize that my time in high school was running out, I felt an immense pressure to pick a college that would be my new home. With every college acceptance letter, I felt not excitement, but a growing pressure to pick the perfect home for me. I was absolutely terrified that I wouldn't find a community that would welcome me into my new home. And I was afraid of leaving my hometown and never feeling at home again. Clayton Valley, we may be leaving the nest for the first time, stepping into the world for the first time, but we are not leaving home. No, we're supposed to look around and discover the place where we belong. We are not supposed to fear finding our community. We are not supposed to fear feeling homesick for the rest of our lives. We're supposed to be the unifier who creates that community. We're supposed to be the ones who welcome in others. We're supposed to be the ones who make anywhere feel like home. We're supposed to be the creators, the advocates, the leaders. Clayton Valley, the world is your home.
Anxiety is not a bad thing. Anxiety, a healthy level of anxiety, allows us to actually produce. Maris was predisposed to anxiety. She biologically was built with an anxious temperament. had her mom not returned to work, Maris may have experienced the manifestation of her eating disorder when she went away to college, which is another very significant time for individuals to get eating disorders, is big life transitions.
I went into college hoping for the best. I wanted to prove that I wasn't like everyone else, and that my disorder was a chapter in my life that had ended with a firm period. Not an ellipses, not a to be continued, not a cliffhanger. In my mind, there was no room for a sequel. And so, the first few weeks of college were a blow to my ego. I found myself feeling out of control, the very reason my life had spiraled into disorder 4 years ago. I found myself calling a friend at midnight one night, crying and telling them I'd realized I was doing things I hadn't done in a long time. I'm doing bad things, I said desperately into the phone. I'm being bad. I'd noticed little habits that I thought I'd banished long ago creeping back into my routine. I found myself obsessively dissecting every morsel of food that was put in front of me. Even occasionally peering into the nutritional labels I'd fought so viciously to tear myself away from in the years before. Am I relapsing? I sobbed into the phone. No, he said. You're not, he explained, because you noticed what's happening, and you care this time. Last time you didn't care. Last time you kept it a secret. Last time you didn't ask for help.
Being aware of it means that you can do something about it, and there's a certain kind of awareness around it that makes it more likely it won't go all the way downhill. But like watching it is like watching an enemy walk back into the room. Like you know what they're capable of.
Winters have always been hard for me. When winter began to bear its face again, I felt the fear settle back in my chest. I started to prepare myself for the worst, for the slow depression that would creep its way into my veins as the temperature dropped. I waited for the stress of finals and tests and work and family to culminate once again, to weigh me back down into the abyss I had crawled myself out of again and again every spring. I waited to shiver, to feel myself shaken to the core, to feel goosebumps on my flesh. I waited for the inevitable, the point that came every year where I felt the cold so deep in my bones I stopped feeling anything else. The rain came, then the frost. I saw my breath suspended in the air, crystalline and foreboding. But the time never came where the chill hit my center, where it began to weigh me down with that heaviness of the ice. When I normally felt contraction inwards, back into the habits that folded me up until I was so tiny I couldn't be seen, I felt an expansion. I felt a heat inside of me, something driving me forwards, keeping me from taking 2 steps back this year. I had taken my own son into the winter.
Like, you're never really cured. Like, there's no cure for mental illness right now. I had to remind myself of that, that's just kind of a reality of living with a mental illness, is that it'll come and it'll go and it ebbs and flows, and things will get better. Things will get exponentially better, and you will be exponentially happier, and things will get easier, but they're never going to be flawless. Like, there's never gonna be no lingering doubts. There's never going to be smooth sailing completely. There's definitely always going to be imperfect parts of life.
Can you be fully recovered? I think it's really important for all individuals to understand that their recovery is going to look unique to anybody else's. To find a balanced relationship with food, that's the ultimate goal. But along with that goes finding balanced relationships in life.
Before I met you, I don't think there was any semblance of spontaneity in my life.
No.
Like, it was like I did the same thing every day and I did it the exact same way, and like this was how I did it.
and I filled every little nook and cranny with work so that it would always be structured. And then I met you, and you were like, well, let's just do it this way. And I started to roll with it, and it was pretty fun.
You're Renaissance
Stare
painting
right
again.
at the camera. She fixed me and I fixed her.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I wanted to look that way.
Fine, I'll look
Okay,
this
fine,
way.
then I'll look this way.
I found the thing I want to stick around and be strong for. I found why everyone was so desperate to keep me alive. Because I meant to teach. And take. And balance and fall down. And breathe and sweat and rest and stretch and melt. Because I meant to live. And I finally know what that means.
You are a promise. You are a song, smooth like a waterfall, a sea in the calm. You are the summer. You are the sun. You are the desert plain where the wild horses run. I want you to know you are the first thought. I want you to know the grace you're made of. I want you to feel that you're mine, dear. Whoa. I want you to know. Deep as a valley, sweet as a stream, dark as a storm cloud, bright as a dream. You are the summer. You are the sun. You are the desert plain where the wild horses run. I want you to know you're the first thought. I want you to know the grace you're made of. I want you to feel that you're mine.